The Vietnam War was one of the most complex, controversial, and transformative conflicts of the 20th century. It was not just a war fought in jungles and rice fields, but a war fought in politics, ideology, media, and public opinion. For the United States, Vietnam challenged beliefs about power, morality, and global responsibility. For Vietnam, it was a long struggle for independence, unity, and survival. This video explores how the war began, how it unfolded, and why its legacy still matters today. Vietnam had a long history of foreign domination. For decades, it was part of French Indochina, ruled by France as a colonial possession. During World War II, Japan occupied Vietnam, weakening French control. After the war, Vietnamese nationalists hoped for independence. One leader stood at the center of this movement, Ho Chi Minh. He combined nationalism with communism and led the Viet Minh in a fight against French rule. In 1954, after France's defeat at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnam was divided at the 17th parallel. North Vietnam became communist under Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam became anti-communist, backed by the United States. This division was meant to be temporary, but it set the stage for war. The Vietnam War cannot be understood without the Cold War. The United States feared the spread of communism across Asia. American leaders believed in the domino theory, the idea that if one nation fell to communism, others would soon follow. To prevent this, the U.S. supported South Vietnam with money, weapons, and military advisors. At first, America avoided direct combat, but instability in South Vietnam and growing insurgency pushed U.S. leaders toward deeper involvement. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident marked a turning point. The U.S. government claimed American ships had been attacked by North Vietnamese forces. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authority to use military force. Soon after, American troops were sent in large numbers. By the late 1960s, over 500,000 U.S. soldiers were deployed in Vietnam. The war shifted from advisory support to full-scale combat. Vietnam's terrain shaped the conflict. Dense jungles, mountains, and villages made conventional warfare difficult. The enemy relied on guerrilla tactics, ambush, booby traps, and surprise attacks. The Viet Cong, communist fighters in the south, blended in with civilians. This made it difficult for U.S. forces to identify the enemy. The war became exhausting, confusing, and psychologically draining for soldiers on both sides. The United States relied on superior firepower. Airstrikes, napalm, and chemical agents like Agent Orange were used to destroy jungle cover. These weapons caused long-term environmental damage and severe health problems for civilians and veterans. Despite technological superiority, the U.S. struggled to achieve clear victories. Body counts were often used as a measure of success, but they failed to reflect political reality. Vietnam was the first televised war. Graphic images of fighting, wounded soldiers, and civilian suffering entered American living rooms. This exposure deeply affected public opinion. Journalists reported from the front lines, sometimes contradicting official government statements. As the war dragged on, public trust in leadership declined. Protests grew across the United States, especially among students and young people. By the late 1960s, opposition to the war intensified. Americans questioned why lives were being lost for unclear goals. Mass protests erupted in cities and on college campuses. Events like the Kent State shootings in 1970 shocked the nation. The war divided families, generations, and political parties. Vietnam became not just a foreign conflict, but a national crisis at home. In 1968, the Tet Offensive shocked Americans. Though militarily costly for North Vietnam, it proved the enemy was far from defeated. Public confidence in victory collapsed. President Richard Nixon introduced Vietnamization, a strategy to transfer combat responsibility to South Vietnamese forces while withdrawing U.S. troops. Peace. Negotiations began in Paris, but fighting continued. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. U.S. combat troops withdrew from Vietnam. However, fighting between North and South Vietnam continued. In 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon. South Vietnam collapsed, and the country was reunified under communist control. The Vietnam War was over. The human cost was enormous. Over 58,000 American soldiers were killed. Millions of Vietnamese civilians and soldiers lost their lives. The war left deep scars. Veterans returned home to a divided nation, often facing neglect and trauma. Politically, the war reshaped U.S. foreign policy and reduced trust in government. The Vietnam War changed how America viewed war, power, and intervention. It influenced future military decisions and public skepticism toward foreign conflicts. For Vietnam, it marked reunification but also decades of recovery. The war remains a powerful lesson about ideology, nationalism, and the limits of military force. Its memory continues to shape politics, culture, and historical debate. The Vietnam War was not just a battlefield struggle. It was a war of ideas, images, and identities. It changed nations, societies, and generations. Understanding Vietnam helps us understand the modern world, the cost of war, and the importance of historical memory.